you can train the model as cheese,
Mhm.
say for example, and then you have two elements. One is effectively the perspective, so it's cheese,
Mhm.
and then it's looking at cheese. So you have in the way you're scripting it, like like it could be from the demon lord's perspective or from the hero's perspective or whatever the
Yeah.
thing is, and then
I may need to add some extra culture to it to
it's
continue the
their
cheese
view of the
manufacturing, but
cheese.
yeah, it
And
seems very
so
watery at the
by the way
moment.
you
Yeah.
script the thing, like if it's from the player's perspective, the script is slightly altered. And so the images are then presented as like external from the cheese as opposed to being the cheese, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that in the world, because you can define individual objects,
Mhm.
instead of it sort of being scene focused, like the whole, like it's each object is its own identity.
Well,
And
in
you're
my
either,
descriptors, they actually go down to texture, smell, like these are
oh
all
yeah,
parts of the yeah.
but it's not your descriptor. What I'm trying to say is in such an environment, you would be actually making cheese as its own descriptor, and then almost having an AP, effectively a sort of a LLM API, just inadvertently
Cheese
happening,
API. Yeah.
where like say for example, a table in the world
Mm.
being described is interacting with the cheese, but it's like from the way the table can experience cheese. So cheese is its own definition, but if you're writing it from the perspective of the table or the player or
Mm.
whatever,
Well, there's a
that
common definition between you and
you
I that when we think of cheese, we think of a block or a
I'm talking about from the
circle.
rendering, the angle of
Mm.
rendering.
All right.
Right? So imagine like a multiplayer game, and when you have this description set up of an environment, the individual characters or the whatever, the way it's not like you have to make it's not just that you can present it as like an LLM looking like that's sort of showing the objects, but you can have it a world that's based on perspective. So the graphical output is showing it to me and it's showing it
Mm.
to you. And
Mhm.
so if my character or whatever the level of,
Interacting with the cheese.
yeah, I don't have arms, I can't
Mm.
feel it. Or, you know what I mean? Or
Mm.
it makes me sick and you can eat it, or like whatever the variable behavior about my interaction to your interaction.
Mhm.
And what I'm trying to say there is you could be writing the same kind of scripted language that describes a scene or a game, but then the rendering output as a filter, effectively like an overlay, like a style,
Mhm.
is then the way you see the descriptor.
The perception of it.
Yeah.
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 And so the same set of data doesn't need to be like, you don't need to have
You
a
get
whole,
rid of the redundancy.
yeah, 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 where you
I get
can,
what you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You
yeah, I
can
get,
simplify it right down to its absolute
yeah,
basics.
where cheese
Yeah.
is literally cheese in its own right.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
like how
It has
cheese,
a
yeah,
definition.
you're not sort of
And
wasting a time like you experience cheese this way.
well, I mean,
Cheese is just
worldwide, like
cheese,
from a human
and you're just
perspective,
the
like we
player
all
character
get
and you
what
interact.
cheese is, don't we? Like when you say cheese,
Mm.
people go, they all get this picture in their mind of what cheese is.
They do,
Yeah.
they do.
And then they all have their relative
Yeah.
perspective to what they
Yeah,
see
some people might
cheese
not like
or
cheese or like
smell
cheese. Yeah,
cheese or
exactly. Yeah,
taste
yeah,
cheese or the texture of
mm,
cheese.
mm, mm.
You know what I mean?
That's
Like
it.
that's their rendition of the
The
perspective of cheese.
rendering of
Mm,
cheese. Yeah,
yeah.
and so in terms of that in gameplay level, you can generate multiple viewpoints in a multiplayer game with the same set of data by
Mm.
simply intermediately running a filter, which is based on the player character's set of like yeah criteria,
Perceptions of what cheese
perceptions.
is.
This is what
Mm,
perceptions of cheese is to experience that and how it makes them like their player well or sick or
mm,
on
mm.
the most crude level and like it's just a basic game where if you're an undead, a potion hurts you, and
A healing
and
potion
a
thrown at you.
poison heals you. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, it's
Because
correct.
you're undead.
Yeah,
Like it's the
depending on what
basic.
your
But
status or
yeah,
your perspective is. Yeah.
but
Correct.
in this game context, you can instead of having to have two objects, one which is a poison and one is a healing potion, you could literally have one thing, and then the way that the character interacts with it is
Based on their perception of that particular
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah, yeah. Because that's how things are. Like you know what I mean?
mm.
Like whatever. Like I don't know. Mercury for some things is completely fine to have.
Deadly. Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
for
yet
others
for
it is
other
not.
mercury for, a decaying or dead body is a preservative.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Whoosh.
Push.
Whooshka.
Yeah. So that's the perception of dead bodies.
Mm.
In relation to Mercury. Mm.